Ever tried downloading like a huge file on kind of spotty Wi-Fi?
Ugh, yeah.
And imagine that, but you're a company, and it's gigabytes of data from a satellite. Painful.
Right. Definitely. And that's exactly the kind of problem that ground station as a service GSaaS is designed to solve.
It's not as flashy as, launching rockets, but it's about to be huge EE.
Mm.
And India is making some really interesting plays in this space.
What's fascinating to me is how strategic this is for India. It's not just about keeping up with the space race. They want to be the go-to hub for space data, kind of like how they became a powerhouse for software services.
Right, like a whole new kind of outsourcing, but for the space age.
Exactly.
So we're diving into a report from InSpace today that's India's Space Promotion and Authorization Center. Think of it like their master plan for making all this happen.
It's ambitious. But to really appreciate just how ambitious, we need to understand why the traditional ground station model just isn't going to cut it anymore.
Okay, so paint a picture for me. You're a company. You've poured your heart into building a satellite.
Lots of late nights, lots of coffee.
Definitely. And now, finally, it's up in orbit, sending down all this valuable data.
Right, but that data doesn't just magically teleport to your computer. You need a way to receive it.
And that's where these ground stations come in.
Exactly. Traditionally, you'd have to build your own dedicated ground station.
Which I'm guessing is not exactly cheap.
Definitely not. We're talking massive antennas, specialized equipment, a whole team of engineers to run the thing. It's a huge barrier to entry, especially for smaller companies or startups.
So GSaaS is kind of like the cloud computing of space data,
Right.
Instead of owning all that expensive hardware, you just rent it.
Exactly. You pay for what you use, get access to a network of ground stations around the world. Need to download some images from your Earth observation satellite, boom, go to a nearby ground station, grab your data, and you're good to go.
Way more flexible, way more affordable.
Exactly. It makes space accessible, which is a huge deal because the number of players in the space industry is exploding.
Right.
We're not just talking government agencies anymore. It's private companies, research institutions, even, like you said, startups.
Everyone wants a piece of the final frontier.
Right. And they all need ground support. That's what makes the GSaaS market so ripe for growth. It's the democratization of space data.
Okay, I'm sold on the potential. But let's talk about India's role in all of this. Why do they think they can be the GSaaS leader?
They're laying the groundwork, that's for sure. This NSpace report, it's basically a blueprint for establishing India not just as a player, but as the go-to destination for GSaaS.
Bold. So how do they plan to do that? What's their strategy?
Well, for one, they're talking about streamlining the whole regulatory process, making it easier for companies to set up shop and operate in India. Less red tape, more support.
Makes sense. Attract investment, encourage innovation.
Exactly. And get this, they're even considering allowing private companies to use ISRO facilities.
Wait, hold on. ISRO, as in like the Indian Space Research Organization? They're going to let private companies use their stuff.
That's what the report suggests. Imagine a startup being able to use ISRO's infrastructure, their expertise. It's a huge deal.
It would be huge. Talk about a vote of confidence.
Right. It could be a game changer.
Okay, so they're creating a supportive environment. But is there actually enough demand to justify all this investment? Is there really that much money to be made in GSaaS?
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really interesting. The report predicts the Indian GSaaS market could be worth a staggering $2.5 billion by 2033.
Okay, now those are some numbers.
Right. And they're not just thinking about serving the domestic market. They want a big chunk of that revenue to come from international customers. Global ambition.
Global ambition, huge market potential. But let's be real, it's not all going to be smooth sailing. There have to be challenges. What are the potential roadblocks on this path to becoming a GSaaS powerhouse?
Well, you've got the obvious ones, competition from established players, technological hurdles. But one thing the report really highlights is the concerns of these new space companies, the startups, the innovators.
What's keeping them up at night?
One of the biggest issues is spectrum allocation. It's like the lifeblood of space communication. But getting access to the right frequency bands can be a nightmare.
Especially with so many players vying for the same limited resources.
Exactly. And it's not just about securing the spectrum. It's about having clear, predictable procedures for actually getting the necessary approvals.
So basically, they want the government to make the process smoother, more transparent.
Exactly. They need to streamline things if they want to attract the best and brightest.
Makes sense. So we've got ambition, we've got potential, but we've also got some serious hurdles to overcome. Okay, so we've laid out some pretty big challenges here, but I get the sense that Eindspace isn't just trying to rain on everyone's parade by highlighting all the problems, right?
Definitely not. This report isn't just about identifying challenges, it's about proposing solutions. And some of them are actually pretty bold.
I'm all ears. How are they going to turn these roadblocks into, like, stepping stones?
Well, they're not afraid to get the government involved. And in this case, I think that's actually a good thing. They're talking about offering some serious financial incentives to get companies to invest in GSaaS, things like subsidies or tax breaks, especially for those pricey Ka-band systems.
How band and. Remind me what that is again.
Think of it this way. If you're just downloading like a small document, you can use a regular internet connection, no problem. But for something massive, like a high-res movie, you'd want fiber optic speeds, right? Ka-band is like the fiber optic network of the satellite world. It can handle huge amounts of data, which is essential for things like high-resolution Earth observation.
Ah, okay. So high speed, high demand, high cost.
And then-
Makes sense that they'd want to incentivize that.
And it's not just about throwing money at the problem. Remember how we were talking about spectrum allocation being a pain point? And this space wants to work directly with the wireless planning and coordination wing to streamline that whole process. Less red tape, clearer guidelines, faster approvals. That would be huge for these companies.
Yes, bureaucracy, faster approvals. That's
Yeah.
the kind of music entrepreneurs love to hear.
Exactly. And they're taking it a step further. They want to set up clear timelines and procedures for all the necessary authorizations, not just from InSpace, but from the Department of Telecommunications as well. So it's about creating a more predictable and business-friendly environment. That's crucial for attracting both domestic and international players.
Okay, so they're addressing the financial hurdles, the regulatory hurdles. But what about the actual technical challenges? What good is a streamlined approval process if you don't have the skills to actually build and operate these systems?
And that's where things get even more interesting. One of their key proposals is to encourage closer collaboration between these new space startups and the established players like ISRO.
So basically, tap into the experience and the knowledge base of India's existing space program. Instead of starting from scratch, leverage the expertise that's already there.
Exactly. Imagine being a startup and suddenly you've got access to ISRO's testing facilities, their engineers, their decades of experience in space technology. It's invaluable.
Talk about a crash course in all things space. I love that approach. It's not just about money, it's about fostering a culture of collaboration and knowledge sharing.
Exactly. And of course, you can't forget about the human element. You need skilled engineers and technicians to build and operate these complex systems. The report acknowledges that, and they want to invest in workforce development programs.
Training the next generation of GSaaS specialists makes perfect sense. But let's zoom out for a second. This report focuses on India, but GSaaS is a global game. How do they plan to compete on a world stage, especially when other countries already have a head start?
Well, they see India's existing strengths in software and IT services as a key differentiator.
Okay, but help me connect the dots here.
Mm.
What does software have to do with ground stations and space data? It's not like they're building apps for astronauts, are they?
Not quite, but you're on the right track. Think about it. GSaaS isn't just about the hardware, the antennas and receivers. It's about the entire data ecosystem that surrounds it.
Ah, I see what you mean. We're talking about managing massive data sets, developing sophisticated algorithms, creating user-friendly platforms for accessing and analyzing all that information that's being beamed down from space. That's where India's software expertise comes into play.
Precisely. It's about creating a seamless and integrated experience for GSaaS customers. They're not just providing the infrastructure, they're providing the tools and the expertise to make sense of all that data. That's how they become indispensable.
It's like offering the whole package. The hardware, the software, the brainpower, all in one place. Makes you wonder what these future GSaaS packages are going to look like.
Imagine subscribing to a specific type of data, whether it's high-resolution imagery for precision agriculture or real-time weather data for disaster management. It's about tailoring the service to the specific needs of each customer.
Okay, so they've got the ambition, the resources, the strategy. But let's get down to brass tacks here. What are some concrete examples of how this is actually going to be used? Who are the customers lining up for all these services?
The possibilities are pretty much endless, but the report highlights a few key areas. First up, you've got Earth observation, which is a massive market in itself.
Yeah, everyone wants a piece of that view from above. It's like having Google Earth, but in real time and way more detail.
Exactly. And we're not just talking pretty pictures. This data can be used for everything from monitoring crop health and optimizing yields to tracking deforestation, predicting natural disasters, even understanding climate change.
So it's about making smarter decisions about how we manage our resources, respond to crises, understand our planet. It's about using space data to make a real difference here on Earth.
Exactly. And it's not just about the big picture stuff. This data can also be used to drastically improve disaster preparedness and response. Imagine being able to track the path of a hurricane in real time, using satellite imagery to guide relief efforts. Get aid to the people who need it most. It could save lives.
Okay, now that's what I'm talking about. Space technology with a direct impact on people's lives. What else have we got?
Another major area is satellite communication. As more and more satellites are launched, the demand for reliable and cost-effective ways to communicate with them is only going to increase.
Right, because those satellites can't just be sending their signals out into the void. They need a way to get that data back down to Earth where we can actually use it.
Exactly. And while the report definitely acknowledges those traditional big geostationary satellites that have been around forever, they're also really interested in these constellations of low Earth orbit satellites, what we call LEO satellites.
Ah, yes. The mega constellations.
Yeah.
Thousands of little satellites blanketing the Earth in connectivity. That's a whole different ballgame in terms of ground stations, right?
Exactly, because those geostationary satellites, they just stay in a fixed position way up in the sky. You can talk to them using a single ground station, no
Yeah.
problem.
Right? Makes sense. But these LEO satellites, they're zipping around the planet a lot faster, right?
They're constantly on the move, which means you need a network of ground stations all over the globe to maintain continuous communication as they fly overhead.
So instead of one giant expensive ground station, you need a bunch of smaller ones all working together, handing off the connection as the satellites go by.
Exactly. And that is why GSaaS is so perfect for these LEO constellations. Because building and operating that kind of global network of ground stations on your own, it's a massive undertaking.
Hugely expensive, too.
Exactly. And that's where GSaaS comes in. It makes it so much more accessible and affordable to use these constellations.
It's like instead of every company having to build their own network of ground stations, they can just tap into a shared one through GSaaS. So much more efficient.
Right. And that opens up so many possibilities. Everything from providing internet access to remote communities to enabling real-time data transmission for all sorts of applications.
Okay, so we've got Earth observation, we've got satellite communication. What else?
They also touch on something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of science fiction space, situational awareness.
Now you've got my attention. Space situational awareness. Is that like tracking alien spaceships or something?
Not quite, at least not yet. But it's not as far off as you might think. Basically, it's about keeping track of all the stuff that's up in space. All the satellites, rocket bodies, even tiny pieces of debris, all that junk that's zipping around our planet.
And it's getting pretty crowded up there, right? One stray bolt is all it takes to cause a catastrophic collision.
And that's exactly why space situational awareness is so important. And that's where GSaaS comes in. Ground stations play a crucial role in tracking all those objects, predicting potential collisions, making sure space stays safe and sustainable.
So it's like air traffic control, but for space, instead of planes, we're talking satellites and space junk.
Perfect analogy. As the number of objects in orbit continues to increase, having a robust space situational awareness system is going to become absolutely essential.
It's like this massive game of space chess, trying to make sure none of those pieces collide. And just like air traffic control keeps our skies safe, GSaaS is crucial for preventing collisions and making sure that space stays usable for generations to come.
Exactly. It's about responsible space exploration.
Okay, so we've covered Earth observation, satellite communication space, situational awareness. It's a pretty impressive resume for GSaaS. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back down to Earth, literally. This report is very focused on the economic potential of GSaaS, the billions of dollars, the job creation, all that good stuff. But what about the bigger picture? What about the potential benefits for society as a whole? How will this technology actually impact the lives of people on the ground? That's what we'll explore in part 3 of our deep dive. It's easy to get caught up in all the economic projections, the billion-dollar figures, all of that. But at the end of the day, tech should be about more than just money, right?
Absolutely. It should improve lives, help us solve problems, right?
Right. So how does GSaaS actually do that? How does it translate into tangible benefits for people?
Well, let's take climate change, for example. Everyone's worried about it, and for good reason. Remember those Earth observation satellites we were talking about?
Yeah, the ones giving us that Google Earth view, but way more detailed in real time.
Exactly. GSaaS is going to make that data so much more accessible and affordable. And that data, that's crucial for understanding things like deforestation, melting glaciers, even predicting extreme weather.
So it's about giving scientists, policymakers, even just regular people the tools to understand climate change and do something about it.
Exactly. And it's not just about the big picture stuff. Think about disaster response. Imagine tracking a hurricane in real time, using satellite data to get aid to the people who need it most. That's GSaaS in action.
Okay, now we're talking. That's what I'm talking about. Using space tech to make a real difference. What else you got?
How about bridging the digital divide? We take internet access for granted, but there are huge parts of the world where reliable internet just doesn't exist.
And that lack of access can really hold people back. Education, jobs, healthcare, everything.
Exactly. And this is where those LEO satellite constellations come in. They can beam down internet signals from space, reaching even the most remote communities.
So instead of relying on cables and towers, which can be tough to set up in certain areas, we're talking about using satellites to create a truly global network.
Right. And with GSaaS making these constellations more feasible to operate, we're talking about connecting billions of people who are currently offline. The impact is huge.
Education, opportunity, access to information. It's like leveling the playing field no matter where you live. Amazing stuff.
It really is. And it's not just about those big picture things. GSaaS can also boost scientific research, studying stars, oceans, even our own atmosphere.
Like opening up a whole new world of understanding.
Exactly. And as we explore further into space, the moon, Mars, beyond GSaaS is going to be essential for supporting those missions, keeping us connected.
So from climate change to connecting the unconnected, even pushing the boundaries of space exploration, GSaaS really is about more than just money. It's about using space technology to create a better future for everyone.
Well said. And what I find encouraging is that this Eye in Space report seems to get that. It's not just about India becoming a space superpower. It's about working together to make a more equitable and sustainable future for everyone on the planet.
A goal everyone can get behind. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. This report was all about India, but GSaaS is a global shift. As this tech keeps growing, it's going to transform industries in ways we haven't even imagined yet. So here's a question for everyone listening. What other unexpected applications could emerge? How will this change the balance of power globally? What new challenges will we face? Just something to ponder as we enter this exciting new frontier.
It's a future full of possibilities, and it's up to all of us to make sure those possibilities benefit everyone.
Couldn't agree more. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into the world of ground station as a service. Hope you enjoyed the journey. Until next time, keep looking up and keep those questions coming.